Hi, it looks like we have about 11 participants who have joined us so far. It's right at 4 o'clock. So I'm going to give it about 2 minutes for everybody who's on to just see. I think we had about 66 people sign up for this session. So we probably still have some that are joining.
Great.
For those who are just joining, we're waiting just a few minutes as people jump on the call with us. So I'm watching that bar and it looks like we're slowing down a little and people jumping on. So it's 4:02 and I'm just going to dive right in. So I'm Kathy Keefe. I'm with Los Alamos National Laboratory and I was asked to serve as the host for today's panel. So a little bit about me. I am a native of Tucumcari. Actually, I'm a Tucumcari High School graduate, but I grew up in eastern New Mexico, spent most of my childhood on ranches in eastern New Mexico. And today, I work at Los Alamos National Laboratory, and I'm the Director of Community Partnerships. So really what that entails is thinking about Los Alamos National Laboratory as a large science R&D entity and how we support and work with communities around us in New Mexico. So a pleasure for me to be here today with my two co-presenters and also with all of you to talk a little bit about our theme today, which is really where I'm gonna have a synopsis of the long and beautifully written, eloquent write-up of this workshop of kind of where science and art meet. Where are those connections? How do they support one another? And really talking about career paths, right? So are there futures in science and art working together? Are there already places where that's happening? So we're hoping that we can have a conversation about that today. So I'm going to kick us off by introducing our panelists today. In alphabetical order, I've already introduced myself. I'm going to introduce Steve Cox, who is a professor at Northern New Mexico College. And also he runs STEM programs, some really interesting STEM programs I hope he's going to tell us about with students in collaborative and communities in Northern New Mexico. He also is on the board of an arts organization, Moving Arts. So every day he really plays out these two worlds and sees them aligning. And I hope he's going to tell us a little bit about that. Our other co-presenter this morning is Brian RASHAP, who will be who comes to us from Intel and years of work in Intel and New Mexico and a science background, and can also talk to us a little bit about where he sees those collisions happening, especially in the digital worlds of science and technology and art. I hope he'll be talking to us a little bit about that. So I'm going to let Steve go first, and I think Steve brought some slides to talk to us today.
I did. Thanks, Kathy. It's great to at least speak out into the universe. I'm not exactly sure who's all there. It's a huge topic. I'm really inspired. I mean, largely by Meow is the low-hanging fruit, the fact that kind of makes science cool for the high school students and elementary school, it's cool, the parents, the families, college students. And I've got lots of collaborations, kind of more or less hacking kind of Meow Wolf projects and bringing them into the high school, and kids are able to build those things and take them on the road, and sometimes even present them back at Meow Wolf. But for today, I chose a slightly different, a more recent, maybe we're always interested in the most recent thing that we're working on. So that's what I'm going to talk about. Kind of creative stewardship is the slides I have prepared, and maybe just a little bit of background. I'm first generation college student. My parents were skeptical, working class, but I was influenced by a draftsman while I was in high school, and I was drafting for a company, a power company in Chicago. I ended up going to engineering in undergraduate, and realizing I wanted to go a little bit deeper than what I was getting, and I need some more basic science. So I slowed down and got a PhD in mathematics. I was then an academic mathematician for the next 20 years. As my body or brain began to decay in my 40s, I became a neuroscientist, again, kind of teaching and practicing for 20 years, and then moved to New Mexico to, out of concern for the scarcity of women and people of color that were entering my STEM fields. So it's more of a service role here, but I mean, service without kind of a punch is this kind of a generic, liberal do-gooder, whatever, Anglo coming in and, and saving folks. So a natural place to go would be art, but another natural place, someplace that New Mexico is quite good at, is the environment. So what I'm going to talk about is kind of a program in environmental stewardship that I've been building with my amazing colleagues in Santa Fe at SimTable. So with that kind of preamble of kind of attitude or history, let me uncover and recover. I think I'm going full screen or close enough. You can see myself, my stuff.
I can see your stuff, Steve.
Yeah.
But I can also see the other slides on the left-hand side.
Yeah.
If there's a way you can do slideshow, that may give us the full screen of your presentation.
I think I did slideshow, so let me try one more. Try to get rid of. I think I've hidden the stuff that's this is just in Google Slides, so I think there's not a whole lot there other than text, and these are largely just guideposts for me. And so as long as you can see the text is large enough, that's the key thing.
That's can.
Okay. Okay, cool. Yeah, so then this is a recent project called Northern Stewards, and it's generated lots of interest among kids and families and high schools and teachers, and also kind of our partners in strange places like in arts and the environment. And so just to lay out, I first want to lay out the challenge, then I'll talk about the skills, and then those things will lead to careers, if that's the arc that I want to take. And so the challenge, is to develop tools and strategies to engage the public in authentic, interactive, actionable, sustained reimagining of our built and natural environment. So I think these are all things that everybody agrees on. Also, lots of young people realize, that the current generation is kind of pretty close to scorched the earth. And so these things are necessary, and one-offs and band-aids aren't going to do it. And so in the next slide, I kind of want to unpack those four bold words. Right? So what do I mean by authentic? What do I mean by interactive? What do I mean by actionable and sustained? And then we'll see a place, where the sciences and the arts need to come together to address, in my mind, need to address this properly. Okay, so in the next slide, I'll just kind of unpack. Let me shrink the heads there. So what I mean by authentic, and this is especially important in New Mexico, is place-based and centered on traditions of marginalized populations. So that there's a strange, kind of cyber myth that technology will solve all problems or end it pretty quickly. And that kind of binary thinking is just so difficult. And we've only been messing, with our ecosystem really since the industrial age for a couple of hundred years, while indigenous folks were maintaining these lands for thousands of years, and they were sustaining a rich life. And we have a lot to learn from that, and not in some kind of tokenized way, but place-based marginalized populations. That's my definition of authentic. And interactive is a thing these days, right? Because people's attention spans have gone way down with the ability to interact with a cell phone. So kind of, vanilla text, fixed images are not going to do it. And so also to really engage them, they needs to be hands-on. They need to be immersed. It needs to be 3D. But it's not an entertainment device if we really are to have an impact on the environment, a sustainable impact on the environment. So that's what I mean kind of by actionable. This is not, the interactiveness is not just a simulation, not just some kind of AR, VR entertainment. But actionable means that these local stakeholders, as they find voice, are not just playing in a built environment, that we are co-constructing the next level of the natural and the built world. And for me, what sustained means is this kind of iterative process that I learned from Mitch Resnick in the lifelong kindergarten group in the media lab at MIT. And for Resnick, the creative spiral is you imagine, you create, you critique, and then you reimagine. So that I'm a little bit stuck on this reimagine word, but I think it has a lot to do with we're not just stuck in a rut. We need to get out and fix it and then kind of revisit in 25, 30 years. So lots of our infrastructure is failing because we haven't really realized that we're in a creative spiral, not a downward spiral, but a creative spiral where things require, maintenance and critique and imagination. So that's an unpacking. And again, I've got the same challenge for you on the same page. And now let me speak to what I believe now, watching the students that I'm training, watch the colleagues in Santa Fe and throughout the North that I'm interacting with. What are some of the skill sets that bring, so authenticity, in my experience, requires, this is a symbol for me for require. So these are the pieces that need to go into authenticity. So listening in languages, it's we're not taking indigenous populations seriously if we don't have a serious understanding of or curiosity, at least in geography and history. And to make a difference, we need to understand environmental science in the sense that what have these lands been through? What were things that worked? What were things that are not working? The interactivity is the most natural place, for arts, as I understand it, as an outsider to the arts. Although, art without history and environmental science or languages is also a little bit dry. But to make that interactive, we need people with web development skills, people with augmented reality skills, people with interest in virtual reality, people doing 3D design. These are gigantic assets that are difficult to integrate, even still today. So kind of a grounding in data science. And then to animate things as they move through these platforms. The modeling methodology of the day that we're using in Northern Stewards is agent-based modeling. Something that came out of the Santa Fe Institute and was adopted by LaSalle National Lab 25, 30 years ago. And it has a great foundation out of Northwestern these days. I can talk in more detail about that if necessary. So that's the interactivity. The most natural artistic skills are there, but also, so art without language, also art without leadership is a little bit neutered, right? So actionable means, engagement's going to happen through authenticity and interactivity, but is there going to be progress on kind of ideas or excitement that comes out of that engagement? And that's going to require a serious amount of organization and management skills and some leadership to kind of let the best ideas bubble to the top and the current iteration of the creative spiral. And if this is going to be sustained, it's going to require commitment. Being working in education, I'm really, really discouraged by the revolving door of teachers and administrators that come to our state, and really, really concerned with ways to create environments that keep teachers here. So again, if we're going to have a sustained impact on the environment, we need to keep our workers, our idea folks engaged. But also, if they're going to make it work, it can't be on their own. They need connections, and connections, of course, require or lead to the ability to fundraise. So those are just my kind of 3 slides on 4 words. And to get back to the theme that Kathy tried to keep us on, so the natural careers coming from 3D design interactivity our partners and a lot of the stuff that we're going forward with is architecture and design. The sim table and the stewardship ideas are largely kind of manifestations of products that were first built for emergency management. So, the tragedy of putting humans in the way of a fire or a flood or disasters, we now have technology that can bring in sensors. We can monitor things and even do things with drones that don't need to have humans in the way. So our ability to kind of understand maps and move people around is crucial. So that's a natural career path that requires some people with scientific and artistic skills. But largely, probably the biggest group that's kind of come towards us as looking for interns and like our planning conservation groups, either working for city, Pueblo, state, federal, or nonprofit agencies. We are teaching kids along the way to develop voice and to use beautiful platforms that can tell stories. So there's a natural place for science journalism, for art journalism to come together. There's some beautiful publications that I can give as an examples, High Country News being the foremost one. And then finally, for those, kind of rebel-minded, artists who aren't looking for a full-time job, the freelance world. So these state agencies are in need of people with platform skills that can drone, that can tell stories. These old bureaucracies are really, really slow to change, and they're happy to do contract work. So I'm gonna stop my blitz of slides. I wasn't keeping track of time, Kathy. I get too excited about these things, so I hope I didn't blab on too long. I hope that maybe started a little bit some folks thinking. I would love to have conversations with folks on either side of the art or the science or the in-between of the environment. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. We appreciate your presentation. I have a quick follow-up. So would you describe to everyone on the call what SimTable is, what that technology looks like?
Yeah. So thanks. So SimTable is short for a simulation table. And I'm going to begin with a kumbaya mantra that really is the feel-good thing, and then I can get into the details. The kumbaya moment is the statement that it's not what's on the table, it's who's around the table. And so the simulation table is it's a tactile, large table covered in sand with a projector over the top and a camera, both connected and interfacing with a computer. The projector beams down, for example, the elevation in a small quadrant in the forest. And with that elevation, we see, so maybe high elevation is red and low elevation is blue. The folks around the table come in with their hands and they mold the sand into the high parts and the low parts. And then the kind of the director at the table hands out a laser pointer and he asks one of the participants around the table to make it rain. And so rain begins to flow downhill. And as it goes downhill, we begin to see the elevation is interesting, but there are some arroyos that are beginning to cut that might not have been clear from the elevation. And as this is happening, one of the stakeholders, one of the community members at the table, is able to say, things move much faster to that arroyo. That's a burn scar from 3 years ago that's not on these satellite data. And there we begin a conversation about the stewardship of the land in a way that automatically people put a flag down. That's my back 40. This is the place for my family vacations in the mountains. This is the dam that we're quite concerned with at Santa Cruz. Yada yada yada. So there's the people around the table know this landscape. They're also concerned with the mismanagement of the landscape, or they're concerned about proposals to expand a ski resort or a dump site. They're concerned about kind of bringing beavers or wolves back into that environment. They know which farmers have kind of cattle stakes from BLM. And so the sim table is a way to bring the community around the table and not a bunch of what ifs. So there's a lot of data, even a lot of the data is even constructed locally. So I've got kids with phones and drones out in their own backyards, kind of remapping. And the beautiful word that Jim Note uses in Zuni Pueblo is counter mapping. The kids know that these maps are made by conquistadors. And so this is their chance to remap around the table, right, and to share their local knowledge. So beyond that, SimTable, they can not just rain on the world, they can release chlorine gas. They can start a fire and watch it move uphill and in the wind. they can watch smoke move across the continent, right? And so smoke, so it's the fires in Canada largely, you know, we're burning where there were folks were not living. There were not many structures damaged, but the smoke damage as far as DC and New York. So models of smokes and plume. They can also create evacuation zones, and you choose, you know, where the fire or the flood is going. So they can map out the movement of water and gas, and also traffic and fire and infestations of bugs. And these things are then they're truth tested by the locals that are there, you know, who can better understand which roads are accessible, which roads are in, or which roads are out. So it's a way to kind of physically and tactically give locals voice about decisions about how their land is to be governed. And the locals get quite you know, excited about having the ability to discuss these things in real time, and they don't even realize at first that they're in some augmented reality environment. The environment is so good that they're just right into the science and the geography. They're asking for new layers of data. They know that this is pinyon and juniper when the model says it's grassland. So they're able to make changes and ask for things like on the fly. This is kind of what I meant by actionable. They're not just being handed a sim table, you know, reconstruction by a company, right? They actually, the community is involved in curating, right, and improving the veracity of the map so that they can better respond to the next disaster, or so they can better recreate what they want their environment to look like.
Thanks, Steve. Great
Thanks.
explanation. I think that really helps to, at least me, to visualize, right, the technology that you're talking about.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I welcome. So right now I'm planting these DIY sim tables. We just installed one in Taos a few weeks ago. We'll be installing one at the end of the summer at Espanola Valley High, and I'm putting another one in Capitol High this summer. And so the idea is for students and teachers to begin to use these and to raise expectations in the community.
Great, thank you for that. Brian, you've been quiet to this point, but we want to hear from you.
Thank you, Kathy. You know, as you mentioned in the opening, I come from a career at Intel Corporation. I was there for a few decades. I was fortunate enough, a little bit over 5 years ago now, to be able to start an encore career. And I had always wanted to teach. And so I found my way to Central New Mexico Community College, or CNM. And I am currently, well, I do a variety of things here, but my main job is to teach workforce development in a format of a boot camp. And so there are really, one of my passions these days is to help folks get into technology that may have experienced barriers in traditional education paths, be it for-year education or even two-year education type programs. There's a lot of individuals that, for, you know, really kind of sad reasons sometimes, are not given the confidence in science and math and feel like that the technology fields are locked out for them. And so what I teach is a 10-week program here at CNM. It's on the Internet of Things, which is it's not a great term, but smart connected devices. So we make products like a Ring doorbell or a Nest thermostat, but more exciting than that. I get students for 40 hours a week for those 10 weeks. They come in with no background in the sciences. So all I ask is, you know what a computer mouse is, and you know how to divide using a calculator. So you don't have to divide by hand. And if you can do that, students learn electronics, they learn programming, they learn 3D modeling, 3D printing, laser cutting, woodworking, metalworking, and a bunch of other skills in order to make products. And so I've been doing this for probably about 4 years now. I've been teaching this course. And then at the same time, I also been involved with Creative Startups, one of the kind of sponsors of this week, for many, many years, and I serve as the board chair right now. And so I've been in and out of the creative community in lots of different ways. In my Internet of Things workforce development bootcamp, I found that I had artists naturally finding their way into my classroom. Maybe someone that wanted to had this idea on how to add that required adding technology to their art. and wanted to learn some of these technology skills. Or I've had individuals, there's a teacher from Albuquerque Academy, an art teacher from Albuquerque Academy, that before he went to teach there, wanted to up his technology so that he could teach technology and art in the high school environment. And all of that led to a partnership that CNM and the city of Albuquerque have. Many on the panel on the Zoom today might know about the rail trail that's planned for Albuquerque. The train's coming by, so I apologize if there's background music or background noise. There's a 7-mile path planned around kind of downtown Albuquerque down to the Bosque and back called the rail trail. And the city's Department of Culture and the Public Arts Department wanted to create some technology infused public art. And so we did collectively, we did a call for artists, and we've had 10 artists over two of the course cohorts that I've had, 4 and then 6, selected from the public, folks that have applied for this, and they come through the 10-week program and they build first a prototype of what they're envisioning technology infused public art may be. And then the city really sponsors them to kind of continue to create and evolve that artwork. We've had stuff displayed in some art exhibits here in downtown Albuquerque. Many of the artists have taken their creations and kind of been on the road with it throughout New Mexico. And currently, for those of you in Albuquerque, it's the 5th today, so we only have 2 days left, but all 10 artists have all their art on display at Gallery 1, which is the city of Albuquerque's new art gallery in City Hall. And so if you're in Albuquerque and have time at lunch tomorrow, it's well worth the trip over there. But the beauty of it has been the 10 artists have been so different in what their art is, what their artistic impression is. They have come from many, many different backgrounds. Some had a little bit of a technology background or architecture background. Some of them had really very little formal education, even maybe in the arts, maybe self-taught. I've had students as young as 18. I had one of my artists was 81 years old. And so she worked through this class and has added technology to the art that she's been making for decades, which is really, really phenomenal. And it's been a really great experience. It's given me an appreciation on many levels. So one is accessibility to technology to people that may not feel that technology is their thing, is very doable and based on what these artists have created, very successful. In the conversations that myself and Mark Leach, who's the Director of Technology and Innovation for the City of Albuquerque, have had, we often have conversations outside the artistic world on smart community, smart city type of app from the point of view of user experience. And I found that my 10 artists approach user experience very different than the technologists that come to my classes. And it's really wonderful to see that intersection of having the class that just ended had 6 artists and 5, I'll call them job seekers. So we had 11 students and they all learned from each other and shared with each other, and the perspectives were just wonderfully intertwined. We're continuing to do this, so if there's any artists on the Zoom today that want to add technology to their art, city's going to be doing a call for artists in a few weeks now, so I'll just do that little public service announcement. One of your questions or one of your opening things was about art and technology and really work. And one of the things that I found is though the 10 that were formally in the program, probably another half dozen artists that have come through the course, while they came primarily to enhance their way to share their visions with the world, the technologies that they've applied have been not only interesting, but have been of interest to companies. So for example, one of my artists, she took data from the US Geological Services on water flow in the Rio Grande and bird migration along the Rio Grande, and created this beautiful art piece that has these light colors that are in the shape of the Rio Grande that kind of flex with the water flow. She has these feathers that kind of open up and close based on migration, and she can run like a year's worth of data in a few minutes to be able to show maybe a researcher or maybe just someone that's interested in what's going on in their community, how over the course of a year, both water and wildlife migrate along the Rio Grande. I had another student who was able to, who is a botanist by his undergraduate education. I think I want to say Wisconsin, but I'm probably wrong about that. Came to UNM and got his art degree. He teaches as an adjunct professor there right now. But he was very interested in and this is my view of it, not his view of it, but I'm gonna say how plants think. And so one of his art projects was to pull electrical signals off of plants and trees, and then using a gaming engine, so using I think he did it on Unreal, using one of the 3D gaming engines, he created essentially plant dreams. And so as the plant gets water or sunlight, you kind of see these happy dreams that are very lush and vibrant and very green. If the plant dries out or is in the dark too long, it's kind of gets these fiery scenes. You kind of get these kind of scary animals that come along. And as he and I were talking about it, he shared with me that he was amazed at how this 3D animation that was driven by the plant came together, because it came together in ways that he could not imagine as an artist. So he made all the base features of it, but the plant literally put things together in a way that he could not imagine. And that work, which is in an artistic and maybe in this how do plants dream kind of esoteric, I can't say the word, type of way, is of interest at researchers at UNM that are thinking about how do you monitor plants, let's say for human exploration of the moon or Mars. And so what we're seeing is the artistic drivers are leading to technologies that are applicable not only in the artistic worlds, but also in these kind of technology where some of the places where Steve talked about around sustainability and ecology and place, or maybe in maybe just thinking about how people interact with stuff to improve a manufacturing line. So it's really been a wonderful journey for me and my students in being able to see how if you bring people together that don't traditionally are in the same room together, and you break down all the barriers that prevent someone from being there, just really wonderful things happen. And I think that's, in many ways, Creative Industries Week is really a celebration of that.
Cool.
Cool. I think the same, Steve. So Brian, thanks so much for sharing your work, which is awesome, and also giving us some really good examples and tangible examples of where you see, the arts and technology meeting, and really supporting each other. There's this whole area of thought and conversation about critical thinking, which in my mind is science, right? We measure things, we design things and they have to be exact. We test them and we have to replicate them, which is, critical thinking, one side of the brain, right? And creative thinking, which sometimes we, associate with the other side of the brain and allows us to think freely, is creative and comes up with new ideas and wants to try new things out and is a little bit more open-ended in the way that someone from the creative thinking standpoint would approach a problem. But the theory is, right, that those two skill sets need each other in a team. Because I have the analytical ability to pick something apart and test it and test it and test it and see if it's right. But if it's not right, I also need to figure out how to pivot and what to try next. And that is probably where that creative, side of the brain comes in, that we need somebody on a team that has those skills to help someone who's analyzed it and tested it and said, this can't work, think about then what could work. So I say, in my workplace at Los Alamos National Laboratory, we see this happening all the time. In the the critical thinking, right? We have some of the best minds in the world at thinking about problem solving, thinking about problems and testing, would this work, would this work, would this work? But we also have to couple that with the creative side of putting different kinds of disciplines together, right? And saying, oh, if we put A, B, and C together, could we have a different outcome? And could you help me test that? So kind of that, theory is around critical thinking and creative thinking and how those, those two skill sets play together, and how you need them in every team. Brian and Steve, would you talk a little bit about that? How you see that playing out in your classroom and the projects you're working on, Brian, and the same for you, Steve. Do you see that the creative and our artistic community, where their place may be in the projects that you're working on visualization?
Do you want to go first, Brian? I went first last time.
That sounds good, Steve. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think, humans are naturally kind of visual creatures. And so there tends to be this, unfortunately, particularly in the corporate world, we know that everything becomes this flat two-dimensional PowerPoint slide of not really information, but just kind of this data dump that is not often very useful in helping people kind of find the new and the exciting in things. A lot of our processes that particularly like undergraduate engineers learn is about analysis, and it's about really driving down this kind of well-driven path. And I have found that if you can present data in different ways to people and think about how do you visualize things a little bit differently, and whereas I think definitely the creative folks that have been in my classes, and I hesitate to say just artists can be creative, right? But the folks that come with that kind of creative mindset can think about looking at information differently, present it in a different way that then allows individuals to really kind of get outside the box and create new solutions. As I was saying, that we as humans are visual creatures, at the same time, I also think that there are all the other senses become incredibly important. And when I was at Intel, we used to talk a little bit about that. How do you use kind of your whole being to understand what might be going on, in this case, in a manufacturing environment? And I'm not an automotive expert, and so you can be driving down the road and have an issue with your engine, and you will maybe hear a different sound than you normally hear, or you'll hear a clunk when you turn around a corner, or you'll see smoke coming out of under the hood, right? And you know that something is wrong. Okay, you might not know what it is, but you know that something's different. And if you think about audio, the human ear is incredibly good at distinguishing what are the sounds it normally hears and what do we drown out, and what are those new and unique sounds. And so one of my side projects has been really to think not about the visual space, but to really think about the environment from an audio space, and really think about how do you detect when things are different based on some sound that you're not normally have in the environment. And I find that I've had a number of my students that have come through they're in bands, they're audiophiles, they play with, they make their own equalizers or make their own guitars and things like that. And it's really kind of fun to have conversations with them about how they perceive the non-visual world, and how that information that exists in that can be applied to the problems that, again, like the corporate America's after. And so I love having different types of people at the table, and Steve, I think you mentioned that as you're talking about how do you bring people around the sand and all that type of stuff, and have that diversity of space. Having that diversity of background and that diversity of perspective absolutely makes the result better all the time. Steve?
Yeah. Good stuff. Good stuff. Yeah, it's if I understand, Kathy, what I see largely, I've been mostly around scientists my entire life, and we do tend to drill down, and we're not so easy to wrangle. I mean, the cliche is with that we don't have many social skills. So I'm an applied mathematician, and my friends at the university were pure mathematicians, and one joke was, how do you tell the pure mathematician from the applied mathematician? And the applied mathematician is looking at your shoes, while the pure mathematician, of course, can only look at his own shoes. So there's the ability then, or the idea that the creatives are also there to help organize the the more narrow-minded scientists, so that something more user-friendly or even usable can come out in the wash. And I do for sure. I've been dropping lots of cliches, but I think there is something to that. And what I can give a concrete example, as I've been building laser guitars with ninth graders for the past 5 years. And it's an 8-week project, where it does require them to kind of, well, we first go to Meow and I even before the project came about, by me taking field trips with high school kids and junior high school kids to Meow and seeing where they're spending most of their time. And it was in the laser harp room, where it was dark, smoky, they could be anonymous. They put out a small finger and they create an amazing sound by breaking a laser beam. And so with colleagues, I've been able to bring that down to 3 lasers, but also with an ultrasonic fretboard, so kind of a no hands fretboard on their guitar. So with 13 frets and three lasers, they can make 39 notes, which is even richer than what they can find at Meow. And in the beginning, I kind of handed them a design, and I realized that was really mistaken. And I eventually realized I'm kind of giving them the how-to in the electronics, the how-to in the coding, but they have to kind of think outside the Gothic kind of altar at Meow, or think outside the standard guitar, the people hold in front of them, and to give them the freedom to do the high-level design. And what I didn't realize is what impact that would have on the whole structure, right? Because until the design is really set, you can't begin wiring things if you don't really know how long the neck of the giraffe is going to be. And some kids were building things on sharks. They were putting the speaker in the eye of the shark. They were building these things on hubcaps. And so a lot of the creativity really kind of reinformed the re-engineering of the assembly of this device. And it also gave kids voice. So they were not just following a construction manual made by some old man who's visiting their class. So they really got to decide, kind of even unwittingly, which is kind of a good thing for ninth graders. Not many of them will admit that they're good at art or good at anything. They're acceptable for them to say they can't draw and that they can't do math. And it takes a lot of work. It takes real examples to kind of prove them wrong on that. And so back to your point, Kathy, about the ability of creatives to kind of help integrate the detailed knowledge of coding, electronics in this case, and also just teaching them the math of music and how to build a fretboard. Those are all kind of localized skills that are completely kind of neutral until you put them together on an instrument. So that's my response to your question. So I do think the right and left need to work together, and most of us don't have that in the one brain. So having a team of 2 to 3 plus is really the way to go.
Thank you, guys. Good thoughts. We've got some questions rolling in from our participants today. So I'm going to throw some of those out to you. So first of all, Brian, we'd love to know more about the Plant Dreams project. Where do we find that? Who's the artist?
Yeah, absolutely. The artist name is Adrian Pajone. And one thing that all my artists do, or my students do actually, is they post their projects in 2 places. One is on a website called hackster.io, which is kind of this like maker creative kind of portfolio website. And then we also have YouTube videos of the students' kind of final projects from when they present them to employers and to the art council and stuff like that. I've posted it's posted in the answers to the question and answers is a link to Adrian's project. And if you scroll about halfway down through it, there's a video that kind of shows that Unreal gaming engine version of the plant dream that is just really fun to watch. But it's also really great to kind of read the kind of entire dialogue to find out what someone who had maybe a little bit exposure to stuff, but not really any formal education and stuff, something that someone can learn in just, less than 3 months. Because sometimes we think I have to go, like Steve or myself, you have to go to school for years and years and years in order to get stuff. That's just not true anymore. And in many ways, it's locked people out. And I think Adrian's story and what you'll see on that portfolio post, it's just a great example of what can be done.
Thank you, Brian. We appreciate that. Another question that came up in the Q&A is, so where do I apply for jobs for creative? Where are they posted?
It's interesting because so I'm going to tell you the unfortunate thing first, and then I'll tell you why it's not really as bad as it seems. So a lot of companies still care about, what I'm going to say is pedigree. They care about what degrees you have. They care what your education is. They aren't able, that the HR filters, which may be AI these days, can't look past what is in your background. And often people get filtered out. And then, in our workforce training, we're constantly trying to get people jobs. And so, I look across the various kind of technology websites, and I find that while there are technology jobs, there are a lot of companies that haven't made the connection of, I need an individual that has kind of this background to make my team richer, or that gets filtered out, again, by those prerequisites. When I was at Intel today, what I always tell people is, and I honestly say this is the way that my career has been since forever, is I never look at job requirements. So if I come across something that is interesting to me, I ask myself 2 questions. One is, am I interested in doing it? And 2 is, do I think I can do it? And if so, I apply and I figure out a way to get my foot in the door. All too often we filter out because something says must have an associate's degree in STEM, or a bachelor's degree in STEM, or a master's degree in STEM, right? And you go, oh, that's not me, I'm not going to apply for that. If you can, what I'll encourage people on the panel that are listening today to do is, if you see something you're interested in, just, like surf, right? Surf Indeed and surf LinkedIn and come across something and say, yeah, they're looking for a sciencey person, but I think I can do this with my creative background. Apply, call, find the person that you're going to do, and show up at the door in a non-scary way, and just really present yourself. And I think you'll find more often than not that initiative will change people's minds on what they really need.
Good advice. Really good advice.
Great advice.
Yeah. Steve, do you have any advice here?
No, I really, yeah, I think Brian hit the nail on the head. Yeah, I mean, so the times have changed, and I think that the tech platforms have gotten much more user friendly, and to have a 4-year degree in the foundations, what created those tech platforms. I mean, AI is an example, right? So the AI tools are out there that are now at a meta level, and your ignorance of computer science or statistics will not hold you back in being a creative user and a useful user of these tools. But I agree with Brian that the old folks are still like to create, kind of bullet points that you have to jump through. But that's a luxury that most, especially I would say in an undersourced state like New Mexico, those ideal candidates don't exist. And so don't sell yourself short, Lord. So I'm just rehashing what Brian said. It's very well said.
Thank you both. I'll talk a little bit about from the Los Alamos National Laboratory perspective. We're a large employer, so the laboratory has about 15,000 employees. And as a result, we have employees who have some very straightforward creative jobs. So a lot of technical writers. And I heard, we've had some comments come up about communication and how important communication is. In my mind, definitely that's an art form. Especially someone taking something that's highly technical and being able to write about it, draw it, communicate it in a way that the general population can understand it. So we have a whole team of technical writers, over 100 of them, who work for the laboratory in many different projects, kind of doing that, writing something at the end about the science so that the general public can understand and digest that. And then we also have the graphics part of putting reports together, freehand drawers, just for employee communication. We have a really talented artist who does kind of memes and does technical drawings around, safety procedures using those memes. My office was part of a project about 3 years ago of designing some, what we call traveling trailers. So it's a immersive experience, almost a museum on wheels that's hands-on, that we bring to schools are our primary audiences for it. So we pull it into the parking lot at the junior high or high school, and students and teachers come and engage with our employees. And really all the visuals around that, which is called the challenge, they're called the Challenge Tomorrow trailers, bright colors and visuals, so that anyone can walk in and understand what it's like to work in a chemistry lab, what it looks like. These are the tools, this is the language we use, and these are the applications. All done by a team at the laboratory of different graphic artists and writers who were able to boil it down and tell the story about science that we're doing at Los Alamos National Laboratory to a target audience of mid-school students. So we're hiring those people. We probably have about, I'm going to guess, probably about 200 people on staff that are either specialize in photography, videography, freehand art, graphic art, and writing. And I think that most large organizations have those skill sets now too, because they're an important part of communicating with external audiences, and a more important part these days of communicating with employees and internal audiences, especially as we bring the next generation of workforce in, who's very used to communicating through very quick and visual communications types. So we have some more information, more questions and comments coming in. This is a fun one, and a fun one that I think applies to you both, which is, what kind of a liability insurance do you have to bring students into a laboratory or into one of your programs, Steve, who are working with electronics?
Yeah, I sent a short answer to that, and so I've been fortunate. I guess I'm really interested in serving the most number of kids possible. So I'm not working in kind of informal places, or often even after school. I'm working in classrooms, and there's for kind of STEM or in STEAM, there's an amazing program in New Mexico called New Mexico MESA. MESA stands for Math, Engineering, and Science Achievement. And those are electives typically, and or clubs on occasion, but Espanola is fortunately super strong, has 2 amazing teams. And there are safety considerations for sure, but there are consent forms. Parents know that students will be working with tools and with technology in this classroom. So the tools we're using are all kind of battery powered drills and screwdrivers if necessary. Largely, and the electronics we're working with is all sub 5 volts and below 100 milliamps. So it's all kind of microcontroller based. Like the lasers are somewhat of an issue. These are pen lasers. So the technology that's now been made available and deliverable and usable in high school and the junior high school classrooms is just incredible. So these are now, at least for the technology class I teach at Capital and the MESA classes I teach at Espanola, these are not contentious issues, and the administration is also completely aware. Parents are excited that their kids are getting some. I mean, I can't tell you the joy of the first time I get to teach how to strip a wire in 9th grade. And they look at me like they've never been trusted with a tool before, and this is a very basic tool. So the level of confidence that comes by kind of safe tool using, again, it's kind of it's an unhidden kind of reward in working with these kids.
Thanks, Steve. Brian?
First, yeah, as Steve was talking, I was kind of thinking back to my childhood and what my parents let me do versus what I let my own kids do.
Yes.
Boy, the world has changed over the years, right?
Yeah.
But I think Steve's right. I think it's, one of the things that we do, similar to what Steve talked about, is you train people on the safe operation of tools, and that's kind of like the starting point for things. My classroom's in a giant maker space. We have table saws and drill presses and laser cutters and plasma cutters and lots of things. And before the students can work on equipment, we go through some fairly rigorous, doesn't take long, but rigorous training on kind of like, here's how you safely operate the tool, how you safely operate it for yourself, and how do you not damage the tool as well, because other individuals need to use those same tools. Invariably, you come across some behaviors that are maybe less than ideal, and you find ways to address it and use it as teaching opportunities. We've been fortunate that well, I'm not gonna say fortunate, due to good planning and by having the right training in place, we've been teaching stuff in an environment that has lots of hazards in it without anyone getting injured beyond maybe a paper cut, over the last 5 years. And so you build in safety training from the beginning, and you get, as Steve said, you get people comfortable and confident using hand tools and using more powerful tools, and you build up the stuff. It's usually when you're not confident and you're scared by something that you tend to hurt yourself more.
All good advice. We're closing in on our hour today. So a series of questions coming up, which I don't think surprise us, which are, how do we find more information? So they want to know contact information, how they would find Steve and Brian. And Brian, if they're interested in any of your programs, or Steve, any of the work that you're engaged in, any information sources on those.
Gotcha. Yeah, great. I'll drop contact info and website in the chat.
As will I. And then I think we just posted in the Q&A the link to deepdivecoding.com/IoT, which is where my Internet of Things class is. And I put a little caveat on there. The program's three months, and it looks expensive. It's a little bit over $10,000, which is not attainable by everyone. But we're very fortunate right now that we have some funding sources. And I'll say this to everyone here, is we can make 100% of your tuition. It won't cost you anything in tuition, anything in supplies to take part in either the IoT class or any of the deep dive classes right now. So it's great to be able to do that. As I said, I will drop my my contact information as well into there. And if individuals want to reach out to me personally to learn more about IoT or the kind of artists that have come through the work that we've done here, more than happy to continue the conversation.
All right. I think that wraps us up today. So a big round of applause, or maybe just clapping hands, reactions for our guest today, Brian RASHAP, with CNM and a background at Intel, and Steve Cox, so professor at Northern New Mexico College, who also runs a number of programs around STEM and STEAM outreach in Northern New Mexico. Thank you for joining us, and thanks for the great questions today from everyone who participated.
Thanks, Kathy.
Thank you, Kathy.